Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, the race for Montgomery County Executive is considered too close to call. The County Council proposes racial equity program and debates whether the county should fund attorneys for illegal detainees. And will Larry Hogan's poll numbers translate into votes in November? We're joined by the Dean of Democratic Punditry, Sam Statland, the Secretary of the Maryland Republican Central Committee, Mark Uncapher, and political strategist Susan Heltemes. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. Keith Haller, a political analyst, describes the Maryland Democratic primary for county executives as very fluid, as 6 candidates vie in what many consider the real election, since Montgomery County hasn't elected a Republican as county executive since, well, maybe the last ice age. Sam, it's an interesting group running for the position. There are 3 former members of the county council, a state delegate, a former mayor, and a businessman running. Is Haller correct that the race is too close to predict?
I think Keith is really wrong on that. I think in this kind of race, it's an insider race. It's a Democratic primary race. I think the at-large candidates or the guys who were elected to the council at large, have a greater shot at getting elected executive. I think that narrows it down to really 2 people, with Rose coming in third.
Susan, I'm intrigued by the 3 candidates who are not running who are former council members. What do we know about them, and does one of them have a chance to win? Because obviously Sam doesn't think they do.
Well, let's begin with Bill Frick. He's a state delegate from Bethesda who 4 years ago wanted to run for Attorney General, and then when Brian Frosch was there, he backed out. This time he was going to run for Congress in the 6th, then he backed out and he ran for exec. The one thing that he's known for in Annapolis is that he tried to kill the bill that gave the Netflix show taped here in Maryland tax credits. So that's his thing he's known for. Rose Krasna is the former mayor of Rockville, the only female in the race, and she's the one who gave us the downtown Rockville Center and some other really important things. That's when they annexed the King Farm. And then we have David Blair, who this morning when he was speaking at the Shady Grove, 2 really involved inside Democrats said he's really a Republican. He's a businessman, and he and his wife have committed to spend $2 million of their own money to run for executive.
From what Susan said, that's exactly why these 3 people are going to lose. Number 1, they don't have county name recognition. Number 2, they don't have any troops in the ground inside the Beltway, the Democratic primary crescent that goes from Tacoma Park over to Bethesda. You need to win those jurisdictions to win the executive race, and they don't have a shot at it.
With the 3 county council people, and I think this is where the rub comes in, is there are those who they're saying, well, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. They've had a lot of years between the 3 of them on the council, and there were those who say, what have they accomplished? And then, and Sam is in talking about Mark has the inside with unions and those kinds of people, but people may be looking for someone else.
I want to go to Mark on this, because Mark, not only did Robin Ficker, who is running as the Republican in the county executive race, get a term limits bill passed, but just today there was released a new study by Empower Montgomery that says that Montgomery County needs to change its direction in how it's governed, because otherwise it's not growing fast enough to support all of the things that it wants to spend money on.
Absolutely. That study that you're referring to is a staggering indictment of the past decade in Montgomery County. It shows that while we've got 1/6 of the population in Maryland, we're only attracting about 1 in 10 of the jobs that are being created in the state. Job growth is happening elsewhere in Maryland, not to the same extent here in Montgomery Country or with other jurisdictions.
But isn't that the weakness of the county, of these executives, these county council people who have done such a poor job running the county?
With one exception. And that exception is Mark Elridge, because Mark is the only one that constantly gets blasted because he's not pro this or he's not pro that. He gets labeled as being a non-growth guy. That is not the truth. Of all of the studies, including this one we just saw, one of the main things, one of the main attractions to Montgomery County is to have a great workforce with public transportation. That's what he's been pushing for years, and without the respect of his other council people.
Well, when it
That's
comes
why
to
Mark's gonna
workforce,
win.
though, which needs a lot of work in this county, there are 27,000 jobs at the moment in Montgomery County empty because we don't have the skilled workers for them. And I don't hear any of the candidates talking enough about workforce development and what we need to do.
Sam,
We gotta wrap this up. Go
the
quickly.
study actually said we got a very educated workforce. What we don't have is the creation of new businesses and new jobs, and that's what we need.
All right, so let's move on to our second topic for tonight. Sam, despite protestations that Montgomery County is not a sanctuary county, the county council is debating whether to fund legal counsel for illegal immigrants facing deportation. Isn't this the wrong message at the wrong time?
I have a lot of problems with that, because if you're accused in court of a crime, not just a misdemeanor, then you get a public defender. But if you're accused in this particular circumstance of the alien activities and being illegal for deportation, you don't get a free attorney. You don't have legal representation. So half of me says, why are we doing this? And the other half says it's a fair thing to do. And for that reason, I support it.
Susan,
Everybody's entitled to legal representation.
well, but you're making a distinction between the federal system and
No, a criminal system.
well, you're making a distinction. If they're a detainee and they are being sought to be sent back home by the federal government, you're making a distinction. In a county state court, they are definitely entitled to representation.
Well, where do they
Not
get
in
it from?
immigrant court, not for
But not for
deportation.
deportation.
And they
so
are.
why should the county provide them for this?
the law that was passed, that we discussed at great length last week, Casey, and I wish you had been here, this is only going to help 80 to 90 people. That's it. And in there, it's people who are single households less than 12,000, family households less than 25,000. There are people taken to court for deportation, and they're like 5 and 6 years old. So it's like they don't necessarily have a criminal background. And I absolutely agree with Sam's point that everybody deserves representation, and these people deserve representation. And so I think, it's a good thing.
Mark.
This is pandering at its absolute worst. It only affects, as you mentioned, an extremely
80 to 90 people who are really poor.
a very, very small group of people.
But that's who we have to speak up for, always. You always have to speak up for those who can't speak for themselves.
And it's interesting.
And the basic defense, where you stand to get deported and break up your family, I think
and you could be 5 years old or 6 years old. The city of
Spend the
D.C.
money.
put $500,000 in a fund to do this very thing also. But it's interesting, in D.C., the money can also be used by people who need money to help them become a citizen.
One of the challenges is immigration is a very expensive undertaking.
It is.
And people, it's a complex process, and those who want to do it legally have invested the money. They put up the resources to be able to do this. What the county is proposing is simply political grandstanding, and only, as you mentioned, affects a small group of people, but it's an election year statement.
But it's people who need it more than anyone else, and this is happening.
Susan, your bleeding heart goes right back to the topic we talked about in the first segment, which is we cannot continue to spend on every social issue because we feel sympathetic.
You know what,
to
Casey?
people.
There are some of us who didn't have children yet. We put our money in for schools. There are those people.
There are some people who send their kids to private school and put their money into public schools.
But that's their choice. I didn't have any children. I didn't make.
And you didn't have any choice to pay taxes
either.
No,
I know. But
it's
the
not
thing
like
is that people who need it. Everybody deserves their day in court, and it's proven that if you don't have a lawyer with you in deportation court,
you lose.
That you're out automatically. And there are really good people out there who deserve a hand.
And there are really bad people out there who are going to be returned to the street.
We're not
just,
talking.
just,
These aren't
just like it
criminals.
occurred.
That's the kind of Republicanography that
Well, go
besmirches
study the
whole
statistics in
issue.
Baltimore,
You've got two
where
separate
Baltimore
things.
enacted a similar program just last year, and where criminals were returned to the street to prey on the population
And you
in
know what?
Baltimore,
According to Governor Hogan, the Republican governor of the state of Maryland,
whom you're going to vote for.
he does not think that that's a reason for the high increase of murders in Baltimore.
isn't.
He
Well,
thinks
it
it's
is
because-
not.
We're
It
off
is not-
topic in terms of illegal guns that are in Baltimore is more the issue.
Yes,
Right.
it isn't immigrants that are committing the crime in Baltimore, Casey, and guns
But
are a big
what
part
would
of
be
it.
much more helpful would be if we agreed to work with the president, Democrats and Republicans, to address immigration reform, as opposed to simply pander to the idea
Except
that everybody who's here has an entitlement to stay here regardless of what the law actually said.
Yes,
Mark, you
and
got the last word on this. When we come back from this short break, will Governor Hogan's poll numbers translate into votes in November? And welcome back. According to the Washington Post, Montgomery County is poised on creating a new policy mandate that all of its action be weighed against how they might affect equity, racial, and otherwise, among its roughly 1 million residents. Sam, this proposal is intended to identify institutional racism in government. Is such a program necessary?
You know, I thought I lived in Montgomery County, Maryland, where that was already deeply entwined into county government. That those people in charge did everything they can so that we have equal opportunities, so that people have an advantage to gain, so that salaries between men and women were pretty much balanced. I don't think we need this. I really don't. I think it's just another way to spend money.
Mark, is this progressivism run amok?
This is an indictment on Montgomery County government. The idea, I agree with Sam, that after all these years and all these policies, that somehow this is an admission that somehow the existing processes aren't working and aren't equitable. The whole idea of when you have these kinds of adjustments is when they're redressing things that were done wrong. So apparently the council thinks that this is an unfair county government.
I'm really surprised too. I was surprised that this proposal was even being considered exactly for the same reason that Sam was saying, which is I thought our council bent over backwards already to make sure that there was fairness and equity in every program that it had. Here's what I'm concerned about, Susan, and I want to ask you about this. There seems to be a lot of attacks on white people these days. There's claims of institutional racism, unintended racism, and all kind of charges that white people are racially insensitive. Won't such a program that we're just talking about further alienate white Americans who think, I'm tired of being picked on by government for telling me that I'm racist when I'm not?
No, it has nothing to do with racism. It has to do with equity. And I think enlightened people, Casey, are not going to call this racism any way you look at it. However, I think it is one of those things in Montgomery County where we spend a lot of money. And Bruce Adams used to, harangue on this all the time. Where you study and you study and you study an issue. And I think Mark is right. I think we've tried to do it in the county, and I think this is just a little too good. I don't believe that people are going to hold it against anybody. I don't think that white people are going to be up in arms. I think most voters in Montgomery County feel that we have rights, we have an obligation. For those, much has been given, much is expected. And I think that most people...
Susan, that's just pablum.
No, it's the truth.
Honest to goodness.
No, people
This
do.
is why people are elected to government, is to be fair. And we've got a history of fairness in this county. I mean, this type of program only serves Nancy Navarro and the ultra liberals who are pandering for votes.
And you are going overboard, Casey, with those words. I think that
No, but
there might be some thought in it now with the inequality that's coming out of the White House right now.
It's a misplaced priority. What we need is economic development in this county.
I don't think anybody would disagree with you on
But
that.
the focus is on this as opposed to creating
But I
jobs.
think that most people can, like, what do they say, walk and chew gum at the same time?
Apparently, according to the study,
I gotta
they
tell
haven't
you,
been doing
these
What
it.
are
I
the
would
kind
rather
of
have
programs
seen-
that led to people to want to vote for term limits because they see these inconsequential actions being taken by their legislators and not really focusing on what's important, as Mark is suggesting, which is economic growth.
I think
this
that-
county is spinning itself is creating a debt bomb for itself because it is continuing to spend and not be responsible
but
for
the
growth.
one-
Well, that
good
was a
thing is-
better. That was another thing that was wrong with that article. Our AAA bond rating is terrific and dynamite. We just had a review. The rating agencies all said you guys are moving absolutely in the right direction. So
and
it
Montgomery
just
County
to have
has
debt
the
doesn't
biggest.
mean it's too much
Montgomery
debt.
County has the biggest rainy day fund in history. So we have a cushion. Although I am concerned if certain county exec candidate would get in there, it could all be gone in a day. But you never know.
Well, let's see what's going to
You heard
happen.
it from Susan.
Let's see what's going to happen. Let's translate into the governor's race because that's the next big race that's coming up. And with the end of the General Assembly, the race for governor can begin in earnest. According to the Baltimore Sun, Republican Governor Larry Hogan is dominating. He's crushing all of the prospective Democratic rivals by double digits. But the question remains, whom will the popular governor face in the primary in June? Sam, of the 7 major candidates running for the Democratic nomination, is there a front runner?
I think it's more or less a tie between Rich Madaleno and Rashid Baker. I think of those are the top two.
Seriously?
Top two. Yep.
Rich Madaleno and
Madaleno.
Rashern Baker.
Yes.
As
Rich
the,
has been
as the
all
top.
over the state. He's
You know,
gotten great
one
press.
one
He has a terrific
one
press.
analyst
And I
who
like his
heard
commercial.
Madaleno's ads criticized him by saying, they're only running in Montgomery County. That means he really doesn't have a base outside of Montgomery County, that nobody knows who he is. And oh, by the way, he probably doesn't have enough money to run ads statewide.
He's gotten great support statewide.
He's been winning straw polls and
He has,
places.
Straw
everywhere.
polls are not the election.
No, nobody
Well,
says
in the
they are.
end, we'll see what happens.
Well, Susan, let's talk about polls and straw polls. A poll conducted by Goucher College found that 69% of the respondents approve of Governor Hogan's performance and see him as a moderate rather than a conservative boogeyman. Will this be enough to elect him in November?
I happened to be at a dinner on Saturday night at the same table with Governor Hogan, and he's a very happy person and, smiling and laughing and hitting you on the back. However, and when he wasn't there, I asked people in the room, well, what do you think he's done? There are 3 things that came out. He fought cancer and won. He changed the school date till after Labor Day, and he reduced the toll on the Bay Bridge. That's what he is remembered for. So I think when it comes down to real issues, he hasn't really faced any real issues head on. We'll see.
Well, Susan, let's see what Mark has to say about whether or not Governor Hogan has a chance to win re-election.
Sure, and what our polling data has consistently shown, not just ours, but other data, is that about a quarter of Democrats are supporting Hogan for re-election.
At the moment.
Well, this has actually
I would
been
definitely give him an outside shot.
Thank you very much. No, but very consistently, a lot of Democrats are not comfortable with the direction, at least here in Montgomery County, that the Democratic Party has taken, and that has given an opening to Larry Hogan in this state.
I think that I think we have to wait and see it. I think the turnout is going to be higher among Democrats than it has been in a long, long time, and I think that is going to make a difference. And I think, whether you like it or not, I think that 45's behavior down in Washington is going to have an effect. People in Maryland see his behavior day in and day out. And so I think this race is going to be a toss-up till the day after the election.
What I think is going to be the most interesting race is the executive race. I want to see how Robin's going to do, Robin Ficker is going to do in the end. Whether or not the term limits will carry him through, whether or not the majority of Democrats will absolutely bury him, as we have in the past. I think that's going to be a really interesting race.
Well, I mean, if Robin is capable of campaigning on a reasonable basis,
Well, there you go.
and getting reasonable attention during his campaign. I mean, thus far, his whole campaign has been ignored by the press.
Because there really isn't one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know,
What do you think, Mark?
I think he's their active campaign, and I think one of the advantages is this campaign finance system that has created that some rather perverse incentives where small donations can end up
And
being
he's
multiplied.
doing public financing.
And he is doing
you
public
know, I'm glad
financing.
that you did such a nice job of segueing there, Sam. We have to wrap it up. Stay tuned for parting shots. And welcome back. Now with parting shots, Sam Statland.
Folks, you know, this is the 50th anniversary of Mobile Medical Incorporated. Mobile Medical for 50 years has been delivering free health care in Montgomery County to those people that have no insurance, and in fact could be one of your neighbors. And because of that, we are having two events this year. Our Laugh-In, which is going to be this coming month, and also a 50th anniversary in the fall. Some of you have gotten mailers. Please support Mobile Medical. We have great events, and we need your support. Thanks.
Thank you, Sam. Mark Uncapher, your parting shot, please.
Well, after some bad news, some good news this week. Larry Hogan was here in the county and was signing legislation dealing with funding for Metro and also the, quote, Prime Act, which will helpfully attract Amazon to our state and actually to our county as well. So there is effort going on economic development, despite the headwinds that we sometimes run into in Rockville.
Thank you, Mark. Susan, your parting shot.
On Wednesday night, I was honored to be at the Montgomery Community Media Gala, and they gave the EPIC Awards out on that night. And one of the things that was announced at that time is that Nat Hobson is the new CEO of MCM. First of all, I want to say congratulations, Nanette. I know that you're going to do a great job. The purpose of Montgomery Community Media is to educate, engage, and inform. And in today's society where we have fewer and fewer local news entities and newspapers, this is very important. And I was very alarmed today when I learned that a poll was taken about freedom of the press in 190 countries around the world. And the United States has dropped terribly. We are now 45th for freedom of the press. That is disgusting. Norway, which I think is the happiest country, was #1. They also have the most freedom of the press. And there are those who are very alarmed about what's happened in the last year. So MCM, your job is more critical than ever. Inform, engage, and educate. You have the task. Again, congratulations to MCM and Nanette. Good luck.
Thank you, Susan. And as we wrap up this show, I hope everyone has an opportunity to take a look at the Empower Montgomery study that was released. I know there are those who differ as to the statistical support that it has, but the one conclusion is we need additional economic growth here in Montgomery County. Hopefully there will be a spur from Amazon headquarters 2 moving to White Flint and ruining my commute from now on. But the bottom line is we need more economic growth to fill the demands and to fill the valuable jobs that are needed here in Montgomery County. So for 21 this week, I want to thank the panel for being here this week. Great lively debate. You know, some of the topics we talk about are difficult, talking about racial issues, talking about economic issues, but we do it in a nice, civilized, and open and honest way. So I want to thank you, and I want to thank the panel, the audience for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.